I heard the crunching sound before I saw the damage. It was a Saturday morning, sun was out, coffee in hand, and I was heading to check the pool filter before my brother came over to barbecue. That's when I saw him. A skinny kid, maybe 14 or 15, standing next to my busted pool pump, holding what looked like a golf club. The motor housing was completely shattered, wires hanging out like spaghetti. "Hey, what the hell are you doing?" I yelled, jogging toward the fence. The kid flinched, dropped the club, and bolted through the side gate. I recognized him instantly. Braden, the troublemaker son of our HOA president, Zelina Zimmerman. A classic HOA Karen, Zelina had the haircut, the attitude, and enough passive aggression to power a small country. She'd fined me twice last year for having non-regulation patio furniture. Same set I'd had for years. She walked around the neighborhood like she ran the Pentagon. I stormed over to her house, 2 doors down, and rang the bell hard enough to jam it. Zelina opened the door, already scowling. "Yancy, what now? Your son just destroyed my pool pump. I saw him with my own eyes." She crossed her arms. "Braden has been inside all morning. You must be mistaken." He ran out my side gate with a golf club. The pump smashed. "I want it fixed immediately." She rolled her eyes so hard I thought she might sprain something. "That pump has been making noise for months. Maybe it just finally broke." "Don't play games with me, Zelina. I've got security footage, and your little menace was caught red-handed." Her face twitched. "I'll talk to him." "No, you'll pay for the damage. A full replacement. That pump's less than a year old." She slammed the door in my face. I walked back to my house, fuming. I pulled the footage from my outdoor cameras, clear as day. Braden hopping my fence, swinging the club like he was teeing off at the Masters. I forwarded it to my lawyer buddy, Nate. "This enough to get them to cough up the cost?" He called me back 10 minutes later. "Yancy, not only can you make them pay, but with her position in the HOA. If she tries to cover it up or lie, it could be considered HOA misconduct. That's civil court territory." I grinned. Finally, some leverage. Monday morning, I filed a claim in small claims court and included a complaint with the city's HOA oversight committee. I even CC'd the HOA treasurer, who hates Zelina with the fire of 1,000 suns. By Wednesday, the whole neighborhood was buzzing. People were stopping during their dog walks. "You really taking Zelina to court?" one neighbor asked. "Damn right I am," I said. "She's not above the rules just because she prints the newsletters." Apparently, this wasn't Braden's first strike. The Jenkins Garden Gnome army mysteriously vanished last spring, and someone's spray painted a smiley face on the Myers garage. No proof back then. Now, I had it in high def. Zelina tried to hold an emergency HOA meeting to discuss neighborhood defamation. I showed up with a manila folder, a USB stick, and one goal in mind: take her down with her own rules. She glared at me as I took a seat. "This isn't a courtroom, Yancy." "No," I said, plugging in the USB, "but it's going to be soon." The USB drive clicked into the projector's port with a satisfying snap, and the image of Zelina's son mid-swing filled the community center wall. The room went dead silent. You could practically hear the shuffle of sandals and the quiet gasp from old man Rourke in the back. Zelina didn't move at first. She just stared at the image, hands gripping the sides of her clipboard like it was a lifeline. Her voice, when it finally came, was too calm to be real. "This footage could be fabricated." I turned to her. "You're accusing me of doctoring evidence now?" She looked over at the treasurer, Mrs. Havorson, who narrowed her eyes without saying a word. The tension was thick enough to chew. "Let's focus," Zelina said sharply. "This meeting is about community concerns, not personal attacks." "Then let's talk about community concerns," I said, stepping forward. "Like how the HOA president's son vandalized private property, like how the HOA board has ignored multiple complaints about his behavior. Like how this footage has a time stamp that matches the exact moment the pump was destroyed." I pointed to the screen. "And how you lied about him being inside all morning." Someone coughed. A chair squeaked. No one came to her defense. She tried to pivot. "This isn't the venue for adjudicating criminal behavior." I nodded. You're right. That's why I filed a police report this morning. And since your son entered my property without permission and caused over $3,000 in damage, the officer classified it as intentional property destruction. They're sending someone by to question him. Zelina's jaw tensed in a way that made her neck stiffen. She opened her mouth but then shut it again. Every eye in the room was on her. And since you're the legal guardian, I added, you'll be named in the civil suit. Hope you're ready for that too. Mrs. Havorson cleared her throat. I think we've heard enough for today. This meeting is adjourned. Zelina's clipboard thumped against her thigh as she stormed out. Later that evening, as I was replacing the broken fence latch Braden had kicked loose on his way out, a police cruiser pulled up in front of Zelina's house. The officer stepped out, calm, professional. He knocked once. Lights flicked on inside, but no one opened the door. The officer waited, then left a notice tucked into the mailbox. The next morning, my phone buzzed. Nate again. She's already tried to file a counterclaim, he said, sounding half amused, half annoyed. Says the footage violates her family's privacy and that your pump was a hazard. It's nonsense, but she's grasping. She's going to lose, I said. Oh, I know, he replied, but she's going to drag it out unless we hit her where it hurts. I pulled her HOA filings. You're not going to believe this. He emailed over a stack of PDFs. Zelina had been reimbursing herself for administrative tasks through the HOA budget, things like replacing printer ink, buying office snacks, and even a monthly communication stipend that added up to nearly $400. She'd quietly approved the expenses without documenting any board votes. I sent the files to Mrs. Havorson, along with a note. Thought the board should see where the budget's going. By that afternoon, the treasurer called an emergency board session without Zelina. Meanwhile, Braden's little stunt had unintended consequences. The neighbors were ticked. The Millers, who'd once backed Zelina during a heated debate over mailbox design, now avoided her entirely. The Wungs, who never got involved in HOA matters, started forwarding their security footage to me. Turns out Braden had been hopping fences for months. One clip showed him tossing soda cans into the Jenkins koi pond. The court date came quicker than expected. The judge was a sharp-eyed woman who didn't like theatrics. Zelina showed up in a stiff beige blazer, dragging Braden behind her in a button-up 2 sizes too big. His arms stayed folded the entire time. I handed over the footage, the repair invoice from the licensed technician who'd inspected the damage, and the police report. Nate had already laid out everything in a neat timeline with tabs and exhibits. Zelina tried to spin it. My son was playing in our own yard. Mr. Calder's pump was near the fence. It could have been an accident. The judge glanced at the footage again. He hops the fence. That's not your yard, Zelina's voice pinched. It's an open neighborhood. We don't have real property barriers. The judge raised an eyebrow. He went through a gate, closed it behind him, then swung a club at a mechanical unit. You're calling that a misunderstanding? Zelina's mouth opened, then closed. I'm ruling in favor of the plaintiff, the judge said. The full cost of the replacement pump, installation, and court fees. You have 30 days to pay. The gavel struck. Zelina didn't say a word as she left. Braden trailed behind her, head down. I watched them go with the same satisfaction you get from finally pulling out a splinter that's been festering for weeks. By the following weekend, a check arrived in my mailbox. No note, just the amount the judge ordered, written in tight, angry handwriting. But the story didn't end there. The HOA board met the next Monday without Zelina. Mrs. Havorson called me that night. We voted to remove her. The bylaws allow it with a majority quorum if there's evidence of financial misconduct. And after what you sent us, she's out, effective immediately. The next newsletter came in a plain white envelope. No more pastel borders or inspirational quotes about community pride. Just a brief update. The HOA board will be conducting a full audit of prior expenses and implementing new transparency measures. The neighbors were livelier after that. People who used to avoid eye contact during morning walks now waved. The Jenkins started putting their gnome army back out, one piece at a time. I even caught Braden mowing his front yard under the watchful eye of his father, who'd apparently decided it was time to start parenting again. The pump, purring like a kitten. I added a new security cam facing the yard just in case, but I had a feeling I wouldn't be needing it anymore, because sometimes all it takes to clean house is one good swing caught on camera. The week after Zelina was removed from the HOA board, a strange sense of calm settled over the neighborhood. No warning letters tucked into screen doors, no passive-aggressive flyers about acceptable lawn heights, no clipboard patrols. It was almost unsettling, like the quiet after a storm when you're waiting to see what else might have been damaged. I should have known it wasn't over. On Friday evening, I got home from work to find a yellow envelope taped to my front door. No postage, no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper typed in bold, poorly formatted font. All repairs to your pool equipment may violate local zoning and should be reported to the city. Continued violations will result in fines and further action. No signature. No HOA letterhead. Just a veiled threat. I walked straight to my garage, pulled the footage from the door camera, and played it back. There she was, Zelina, wearing a wide-brimmed hat and oversized sunglasses like she was trying to pass incognito at a grocery store. She stuck the envelope to my door with painter's tape, looked around, then walked quickly back toward the sidewalk. I forwarded the clip to Nate with one line. "Thought she was removed," he called 20 minutes later, sounding almost amused. She was. But removal from the board doesn't mean she's banned from being a nuisance. However, impersonating an HOA official, that's a different matter. Is this enough to press charges? Not yet. But if she keeps posing as a board member, she will, I interrupted. She can't help herself. Then we build a case. I spent the next few days checking my cameras every night. Sure enough, by Monday morning, 3 different neighbors had received the same notice. Each one typed slightly differently, but all of them carried the same message: threatening fines, vague zoning violations, and the exact same formatting. Mrs. Halvorson called a special meeting at her house that night. About 15 of us squeezed into her living room, sitting on ottomans and folding chairs. She stood at the fireplace with a stack of the fake notices in her hand. "She's not on the board anymore. She has no authority to send these," she began. "She's using the HOA name without permission," I added. "That's impersonation. It might even be mail fraud if she starts using the postal service." Mr. Simmons, a retired building inspector who rarely spoke at meetings, cleared his throat. "If she's sending these with the intent to intimidate or coerce under false pretenses, we're talking about criminal misrepresentation. That's a state-level offense." The room went quiet again. "I already submitted a complaint to the state's Department of Consumer Protection," Mrs. Halvorson said. "But we need more than just letters. We need proof she's trying to act as a governing body." "She's probably still got access to the HOA email accounts," I said. "She shouldn't," Halvorson replied. "I changed the passwords." Mr. Simmons looked up from his phone. "Has anyone checked the HOA website?" We hadn't. He pulled it up and turned his screen around. A new post had gone up that afternoon, under the President's Message tab. It listed a set of reinstated community expectations, including a ban on yard flags, a new limit on outdoor lighting, and an emergency suspension of all pool-related construction until further notice. "She's hijacked the website," I said. "No," Simmons corrected. "She never gave up admin control. I built that site years ago. She refused to let anyone else manage it." That was the last thread we needed. The next morning, I drove to the county sheriff's office with a printed collection of the fraudulent notices, timestamps from my camera showing her delivering them, screenshots of the website updates, and copies of the HOA meeting minutes showing her removal. By Thursday, a detective followed up. He confirmed Zelina had continued to use the official HOA logo, email, and website to issue unauthorized directives. That crossed into criminal territory: unauthorized use of an official seal, fraudulent misrepresentation of authority, and tampering with community records. She was served a cease and desist notice the same day. But it didn't stop there. On Saturday, I was in my backyard cleaning up after a small cookout when a white sedan pulled into my driveway. Two officers stepped out, one uniformed, one plainclothes. They weren't there for me. "Mr. Calder," the detective said, holding up his badge, "we're following up on the HOA impersonation case. We executed a warrant this morning for Miss Zimmerman's home office." My eyebrows shot up. "Seriously?" We found printouts of the fake notices, correspondence where she posed as the acting HOA president, and drafts for new fines she was planning to issue. She also had access to financial records she wasn't authorized to keep. I leaned on the fence. "So what happens now?" "She's being charged with impersonating an official, unauthorized access of private community data and attempted fraud. Her court date's in 3 weeks. I thanked him, stunned. It was one thing to win in small claims court. It was another to see her face actual criminal charges. The community started to breathe again. The website was taken offline until a new one could be built under secure control. The fake notices stopped. Braden, for the first time, was seen walking home from school with a backpack and earbuds in, no longer smashing things or loitering by people's hedges. About a week before her arraignment, I was outside adjusting the new motion lights in my yard when Mr. Simmons walked up, sipping from a travel mug. "She's lawyered up," he said. I figured. "They're trying to negotiate a plea deal. Misdemeanor instead of felony if she admits to the impersonation. Will she take it?" "She doesn't have much choice. The evidence is airtight." I nodded. "She won't be allowed to serve on any HOA board again, right? Not even as a volunteer," he grinned. "She'll be lucky if she's allowed to host a garage sale without approval." That night, I sat out on my patio, listening to the quiet hum of the repaired pool pump. Lights from the neighbors' backyards glowed softly through the trees. For the first time in months, it felt like the neighborhood belonged to the people again, not to a tyrant with a clipboard or a kid with a golf club. I didn't need a gavel or a badge. I just needed persistence, patience, and a few well-placed cameras. And the next time someone tried to strong-arm this block, they'd know exactly how that ended. The arraignment ended up being scheduled for early Friday morning in the county courthouse, not far from where the city council held their zoning meetings. I took the day off work and showed up in a collared shirt, clean jeans, and a folder of documentation just in case someone tried to twist the truth again. Zelina arrived a few minutes before the hearing, flanked by a gray-suited attorney who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. She wore a stiff navy blazer over a dress 3 decades younger than she was, and she didn't make eye contact with anyone in the hallway. Braden wasn't with her, which probably wasn't a coincidence. The prosecutor, a sharp woman with a clipped walk and a binder under her arm, greeted me with a firm nod as she passed. She didn't stop to chat, but I appreciated the acknowledgement. I'd done my part. Now it was in the system's hands. Inside the courtroom, the judge reviewed the filed charges aloud. Unauthorized use of private HOA records, impersonation of a governing authority, and attempted fraud through distribution of falsified notices. The last charge had been elevated after investigators discovered she'd created a spreadsheet labeling specific neighbors as non-compliant and drafted fine amounts for each one. Not actual infractions, just targets she didn't like. Zelina's attorney requested a plea deal. She'd agree to plead guilty to criminal impersonation and misuse of private data in exchange for avoiding jail time. The prosecutor agreed on one condition. She would be barred from holding any leadership role in any homeowner association or community organization in the state for a minimum of 15 years. The restriction would be entered into the public record. The judge approved the deal without hesitation. The gavel came down with a dry thud, and just like that, The woman who once ran our neighborhood like a petty dictator had her claws clipped by the court. I left the courthouse without saying a word to her. But I did notice her glance toward me as I passed by the benches. It wasn't anger or indignation this time. Just a hollow, tired look like someone who finally realized they weren't in control anymore. That weekend, the neighborhood hosted a block-wide cleanup, an idea floated by the retired couple on the corner who had quietly endured Zelina's reign for years. No one made a big speech. Everyone just showed up early with gloves, trash bags, and yard tools. The old rusted signs Zelina had installed, the ones warning about unauthorized lawn decor and unregistered garden features, were quietly pulled out of the grass and left by the curb. I spent most of the morning trimming the hedges along the back fence while chatting with Simmons, who'd taken over as interim HOA chair until the next election. He had a clipboard tucked under one arm, but not once did he use it to threaten a soul. "She's going to try to move," he said while watching a few kids chalking hopscotch squares on the sidewalk. "Word is she's already listed her house." "Let someone else inherit that energy," I muttered, pulling a root from the soil with more force than necessary. "She'll have a hard time finding another HOA willing to shake her hand, let alone let her in the door." Good. By late afternoon, the neighborhood looked more alive than it had in years. Without the constant threat of fines or citations, people had started adding personal touches back to their yards: painted flower pots, porch swings, handmade trellises. Even the Jenkins family had brought out a homemade wooden bench with their last name carved across the back, something Zelina had once called unapproved signage. Braden hadn't been seen since the court date. Some said he was being homeschooled. Others said he'd been sent to live with a relative out of state. Either way, the air felt lighter without him skulking around. The HOA held their first open election a month later. For the first time in memory, ballots were mailed with prepaid return envelopes, and every household on the block was encouraged to submit candidates. 3 new board members were elected, none of them previously involved in HOA politics. Simmons kept his seat as treasurer, mostly to ensure no one tried to get clever with the finances again. I didn't run. I never wanted to be in charge. I just wanted to be left alone to fix my lawnmower without being accused of running an unauthorized repair facility. One evening, about 2 months after the court case, I received an envelope in the mail. No stamp, just dropped off by hand. Inside was a brief typed apology. It wasn't signed, but I recognized the formal, clipped tone. It was from Zelina. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't try to explain herself. It was a flat statement of regret for the disruption and distress caused by my actions. I tucked it into the back of my repair receipts folder, not because I needed it, but because it felt like a full stop at the end of a chapter. The pool pump, now shielded by a reinforced enclosure and 2 new motion cameras, hummed quietly in the background as I sat on the deck with a cold drink in hand. The sun dipped behind the trees, casting long shadows over the lawn. I hadn't realized how tense the neighborhood had become until it wasn't anymore. Kids rode bikes again. People waved without suspicion. Someone even started a weekly potluck rotating between driveways. No one needed approval. No one asked permission. That's what we'd been missing. Not just freedom from fines or the constant threat of reprimands, but the space to be neighbors again. Real ones. The kind who lend hedge clippers instead of filing complaints, who compliment your flower beds instead of measuring them, who knock on your door because they want to borrow sugar, not because they're holding a violation notice. Zelina's house sold quietly to a young couple who installed a hammock between the trees out front within a week of moving in. They didn't know the history. They just liked the neighborhood. I didn't tell them anything. I figured they'd find out soon enough how far we'd come, and I'd make sure we never went back.